This is the Writers Are People Too podcast, where I just can't get writers to shut up. Tonight, we have with us Gary from BubbleCow Professional Book Editing. Gary, actually, I think we connected on Reddit, and you were originally trying to put together some sort of writing community. So tell me a little bit about your vision behind that community and why you wanted to do that.
Yeah, we did. I think we just messaged each other on Reddit. I've been using Reddit for a long time, and I've always found that though there's a good community on there, it's not always the best if you want direct advice or if you've got a particular problem. So over the years, I'd kind of played around with the idea of having a community where we could offer something more sort of connective and personal one-on-one. So that's where we set up the Discord group. It's been running a few weeks now, and we've attracted quite a few people, and it seems to be quite a lively environment for discussion. I'm enjoying it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Reddit is interesting because I feel like many authors go to Reddit, and this is a blanket statement, so not everybody's like this, but many people go to Reddit, they're like, I want to find people to read my books. But if you're going to go to author subreddits, you're not going to find people who are going to read your books on author subreddits. You're going to find other people who want you to read their books too. So it's this weird dichotomy of I want feedback, but also everyone's busy with their own thing.
I contemplate on a daily basis writing a post that says, just don't promote your book in writers subreddits. They're not your target, unless you've written a book about writing, then they're your target audience. But and I think you do often get. I mean, I've been working in the industry for about 20 years, and you do see in the self-publishing sort of community, I often see a disconnect between writers and their understanding of what marketing really means. Rightly so, they want to be writers, and they will spend their focus and energy, and that's where their skill set is. And yet, turning that book into a success is a completely separate skill set. And I don't think the problem is there isn't one correct answer in how to promote your book. It depends. It completely depends. So it's a difficult area. But yeah, writing buy my book in a Reddit writers subgroup isn't the answer.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, which I've discussed here on the podcast before, which is like being a writer and being an entrepreneur are often very different skill sets. But if you're going to be a self-published author, you have to learn both of them. Yes. And so if you're going to be a writer, it's like a very creative activity. You have to sit down and make things up that don't yet exist. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to learn about marketing. You have to learn about managing people, such as your editors or your book cover designers, like all that kind of stuff. It's a very different skill set, but you've touched on a very interesting point, which is like the marketing aspect. Do you actually do marketing, or are you mostly focused on the editing for books?
No, we solely offer editing. We just offer developmental editing. Okay. It's interesting though that we've worked with many writers that are writing what you would consider full-time. And I've always noticed that they tend to have multiple books. They're good writers, but they also have a very clear understanding of who they're writing for. So they're writing the type of fiction that their readers want to read. And I think they're very well aware of the fact that they are writing a very particular thing. And I think as soon as writers understand that, they've got a much better chance of being successful.
So let's pretend that we have an author who has written 10 books of all the same genre, and they're very good at it, and they've got their audience dialed in, and they want to switch it up. Would you recommend doing that, or would you say, sorry, you're too late down the road?
Do you mean as in a new genre?
Yeah, new genre, new style, that kind of thing.
The problem is you're starting again from scratch. So if you're a fantasy writer and you've written a 10-book fantasy series and you've got people who love your writing, they probably don't want to read a romance. So you are literally starting from scratch again. What you find often happens in the traditional publishing world is writers will write under multiple pseudonyms. Famously, you saw it with Stephen King when he's writing under Bachman, where you get this, they invent a new name for the new genre and they can hopefully start again. But it's difficult. If you were 10 books in now, you probably not stay. If they're selling, stick with what you got.
Yeah. What's your vision behind BubbleCow for the long term? We talked a little bit about what you're hoping for this writing community, but for your business, what do you see that doing in the next 10 years?
That's a really interesting question. So we started. I started around 2007 as a full-time editor, I was freelancing a little bit before that, and then I was writing full time before that, and then I was researching before that. So I'd been in the industry 5 or 6 years before I started editing full time, and then I was working as editor for professional publishers. And around 2007 is when we saw the self-publishing world explode. It was the first time we saw the Kindle really start to gain traction, and KDP came along. And it was the first time that you could see writers really have a level playing field to an extent. Anyone could write anything and publish it. And when we came into the market, there was only really editors that had worked for publishers. So I'm a developmental editor. So copy editors, proofreaders, they fit quite well into the self-publishing community because it was quite obvious what they did. But the developmental editing world took a lot of education early on, where we were talking to writers about, what we could do for their books, why they needed us. And we came in with we were one of the first real companies to come in with a kind of vision where we switched our pricing to paper word. So we just quote a price per word. We still do. There's a calculator on our site. You put your book in, that's the price you pay. We don't, no charge, nothing hidden. That's it. It's just straightforward. Whereas at the time, people were quite not as transparent about the costings, and it's difficult for authors when they're lost in this space. They've written this book, they don't know what to do. They know they need an editor, but then what do they need? And then we saw the space grow and develop. And Reedsy came along and changed the landscape for a lot of people. So there's now the big player in that space. But I think what we've continued to see is professional book editors like me offering more and more to writers. So now it's standard for us to have conversation an hour before, an hour after, ongoing. We do unlimited revisions. If you edit with us, we'll look at your book countless times, whatever it takes. It's become a much more competitive industry. Where it's going to go in the next few years, the answer to that is I have no idea. I do know that AI is going to drastically alter the landscape. Independent of what subreddits think, AI is coming. Copy editing is going to be taken over first. It pretty much is now. I think developmental editing is going the same way. I know people will say it's not, but the movement on AI is so dramatic. You're looking at what the latest version of Chat can do, and they've got another one coming out in December. It's just a matter of time. It really is.
So we're getting into a little bit speculative territory with this question here, but do you believe in the human creative spark and that AI will lack something that human creativity lacks? Or is there just a simple formula for success?
I don't know the answer to that question. I genuinely do. I mean, I'm guessing. No one knows. Anyone who tells you they know is lying. I suspect what we're going to see is the same kind of thing. I was thinking about this morning. The same kind of thing as we saw with animation, where you went from drawing on they were drawing on a cell then its computers came along and we're moving and moving and moving. I think we'll see the same thing, and I think there will always be a role for human creativity within that, without a doubt. But if I had to put money on it, I think we're going to see there will be an AI written bestseller within the next few years.
Don't break my heart.
There will be. No one will know. It'll just come along. And people will love it, and then the author will say, "Oh, I wrote most of this with AI." That's my guess.
So going back to 2007, then you said, when Kindle came out, it opened up this market for writers. And I think before that, perhaps, and maybe even still currently, the publishing industry is kind of gate-kept by agents and the publishers. But self-publishing has kind of opened up the door, so to speak. Do you think that for the content of the books and for the market as a whole, that self-publishing has been a positive or a negative?
That's a great question. I am a massive celebrant of self-publishing. I think it's been a positive. I love that it's democratized publishing. I was in the traditional publishing world before that, where I needed an agent. I was getting book deals without an agent, but I couldn't make that level up into, a full-time career until I had an agent. And then once you had an agent, it opened the doors and you were getting more deals. When I first saw it, I think I became kind of quite jaded initially because I thought we would see much higher quality work than we did at first. Though now I think the quality of work that we see is amazing. I must admit, some of my favourite books and my favourite authors now are self-published writers. I really do. Some of the writers I edit, I am massive fans of, fanboy over them, because there's some great work out there. And I love the fact also, I'm a huge fan of genre fiction. And I think what self-publishing has allowed is certain genres to really expand and grow. And we've seen a lot of subgenres and niches and work that would never find a home with a traditional publisher that now, writers can find a decent audience, and they're good, and the books are good. I think that's the main thing we've seen is this sort of split in this niche development.
Okay. So what should someone expect from a good developmental edit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is one of those questions that comes up time and time again. I think the first thing that I always say to people is you need to understand just how long it takes to edit a book. It's not just reading a novel. It takes weeks. You would often read a novel twice through, if I'm honest, by the time you've read it and then gone back and reread, then made notes, then gone back and checked again, then changed your mind. And then it can take longer than it would do to just sit and read. So that's the first thing, that if you're employing a professional, it's not going to be cheap. You're paying, if you're just paying for their time, even that, you're looking at weeks. For a good edit, basically what you should get back is a roadmap into how to lift your book to the next level. So every book I've ever edited, I'd like to think I've made better. Sometimes you'll edit a book and it will be quite early in the process and it'll need a lot of work, whereas sometimes you'll edit a book that's just virtually publisher ready. But even in both situations, you are given some kind of basic roadmap, a detailed roadmap of how to improve your book. And it's often, the problem is writers don't know what they don't know. You see so much advice. I mean, I actually made a list of I knew you'd ask this question. I made a list of, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes, of things that common mistakes people write. And the first one I've written,
Let's hit them. Yeah, hit them.
No, the first one at the top is show, don't tell. It's a mantra. It's a cliche, but it's true. You don't say, the I don't know, the handsome man walked into a room. You describe a handsome man walking into a room. You don't say, he was sad. You describe a sad person. And this is the thing I teach I think this is the thing I teach most commonly, is this idea that every human emotion has a physical reaction, has many layered physical reactions. So in sadness, you might cry, but there's many levels you go through to that. And because we're so used to other humans seeing how they react and having no background or no backstory, we're very, very good at seeing a physical reaction and having some kind of understanding of what that means in reality. So if we see someone laughing, we're like, oh, they're happy. We know that. But we also know all of the levels of subtlety. And the best show, don't tell is when you're able to truthfully show human emotional reactions on the page. And that for me is the ultimate goal. I mean, I think this is what people like Hemingway were talking about when they say write truthfully, write what you know. They're talking about writing a human emotion in a way that you can feel that emotion when you read the page. And that is the kind of my kind of top goal. If I can get a writer to do that, then that's great. But that's a lifelong journey. I mean, even Hemingway didn't crack that. So it's a goal. That's the
what
kind
other?
of first... Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, which other ones do you have there? You mentioned show, don't tell, but I'm sure there's plenty of other things.
This is a random list I made as I'm just waiting for you as we were connecting up. Chapter numbers. This one always makes me laugh. You would not believe the amount of people who get their chapter numbers wrong. 1 in 3, easy. I should keep a track of it. Honestly, it's insane. I don't blame you. I don't blame writers. I've done it myself. You're writing chapters, you move them around, you change your mind, you're going to put names, you're going to put numbers, you're going to put nothing, and then they're the wrong number. Formatting dialogue. Please learn to write dialogue. I'm sorry, writers, but please learn. Just the amount of times you see mispunctuated dialogue is insane. But you don't want to be paying someone like me to fix that. You're paying me too much to fix dialogue. That's the thing you can get. You know, you can do yourself. Ironically, Grammarly's really rubbish at it, but you can get you know, it's not overly complicated, and it is something you really should learn. Description. Every new character, every new location should have some level of description. The more important the character, the more important the location, the more detailed the description. So it can vary from literally, the black dog, all the way through to paragraphs littered through your novel. Every time a location or a character alters, the description should be updated. Every time you enter a chapter, you should throw some level, a chapter or a scene, you should throw in some level of description to just ground the reader as they enter that scene. Just put them down. If you think of like description as the heaviest, and then dialogue, and then internal dialogue, you just need to get them on the ground with just some description at the start. If you're writing a genre that is something like sci-fi or fantasy, where you're in a world, if you write, I don't know, we walked into the coffee shop in a contemporary novel, most people will have a picture in their brain. But if you're writing 300 years in the future, you can't do that. So you're going to naturally need more description. So you focus on the things that are different, not the things that are the same. If your cars fly, then focus on the flying car. But don't say the car flies. Describe the sound and the smell and the sight of that car moving. The other two we touched on, not understanding the genre and the tropes. I often find writers will mix up cliche and tropes. Actually, it's funny, on our the Reddit, not Reddit, sorry, our Discord group this morning, we were talking about, I just started rereading The Wizard of Earthsea, and the opening chapter of that is classic hero's journey. There's a young wizard who does this magic act and then gets spotted by an older, more experienced wizard and is taken to wizard school, and it's this classic opening to a hero's journey. If you're reading fantasy, that's a trope, not a cliche. We're well aware of that. We want that kind of thing. Now, you might want to play around with it to disguise it up a little bit, but readers are expecting tropes. If I'm reading a romance novel, I probably don't want a car chase, if I'm honest. You know what I mean? So it's just understanding your genre and readers' expectations is everything. Even things like prologues. Some genres are much more resilient to a prologue than others.
Yeah.
So it's just understanding what your book should have and what your readers are expecting to see.
Okay.
And that's pretty much
so as far as when you go through a book, are you looking at the character arcs and the plot line and many layers of things on top of that, or are you focusing on one specific of those?
So all of them at once and then independently. So I'm looking for. So it's funny because I've edited so many books. I mean, I think I must have edited over 500 books easy. Wow. You get a feel for what's wrong quite early on, and there's often common things like the tension's off. I want my main character to be. I need to understand what my main character's drives and goals are. What are they moving towards? What's the thing they want most out of this moment in the book? What's this tension? What are they trying to achieve? What happens if they don't achieve it? What are the bad consequences? And what happens if they do achieve it? And it doesn't even matter if they'll never do it. And it doesn't matter if it's impossible, as long as we know what the character thinks and we can see that tension. You will often see scenes that will have no real drive towards attention. I'm always looking to be like, okay, what's driving this character forward? What's forcing them to act? What are they trying to achieve? Where do they want to go? Where do they want to be? The more we understand that, the more that gives you tension and movement within a novel. And then there's lots of little things you can do to ramp up certain moments of tension. So, like, the man climbed the ladder is not very interesting, but the man was scared of heights, had to climb the ladder. Well, that's more interesting. The man has to climb the ladder to rescue his cat. That's more interesting. You know, the more you ramp up, the more interesting these scenes become. And then you're looking for things like, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. If you have more to say,
well, then you're looking for things like this scene, then this scene. So rather than this, then this, then this happens, then this happens. You're looking for this happens, therefore this happens. So you should never be able to remove a scene. If you can go to your second scene in your book, pull it out, and it doesn't change anything, that scene doesn't need to be there. So you're always looking for it. It should be moving either the plot or the character forward.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you're looking for plot holes. You're looking for, you know, is the book written in World War II? Does it have people using mobile phones? You'd be amazed the amount of times people make little errors like that. You're looking for things like that, you know. But for me, mostly early on, especially the first read, I want to know what the characters' motivations are. I want to know what they want most in the world. And I want to know what obstacles they need to overcome to achieve it.
So I wrote a manuscript a long time ago that is unpublished for the reasons I'm about to tell you. My main character, and I got this feedback from beta readers, but he seems like he's kind of just dragged along through the whole novel, and all the characters around him, they're the ones with the motives and the ones who are really driving the story forward. Do you think that there's a place in the marketplace for a character like that, or does he need to be a stronger character?
So that is literary fiction. So that is what literary fiction is. Literary fiction is a novel that is a character-driven story that is examining something beyond the kind of 3-act hero's journey plot that I'm focused on. That kind of work is there, but what I would be looking at in that, my initial feedback would be, how is the character changed by the events? How does he react to the events that happen to them? Sorry, I'm assuming it's a he. How do they react to the events that happen to them? And what do we learn as a reader? How does he change? Who is he at the start and who is at the end? You always want to avoid the Batman theory. So with Batman, every single Batman story, he starts as the same character at the start, goes through an arc, and then the next story he's back to where he was. You don't want to do that. You want your characters to be one thing at the start and something else at the end. And that can be up or down. They can go downward decline or up. It doesn't matter as long as we see the change.
Okay.
So with the thing with your book, what I'd want to know is, what are you trying to tell the world? What beyond the character and the story, what you're trying to communicate?
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. I wrote this book when I think I started it in 2014 or so and finished it in 2017. So it's been sitting for long enough for me to go in it and make some massive changes without hurting my ego.
Can't have an ego.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I've just been learning with, like, even this channel or learning how to write or like career. You just got to set aside your ego and learn from people who are better than you. And that's kind of like what this channel is about. I started this channel originally almost 2 years ago now, and I was like, I want to publish a book. So I need to learn from authors what they've done that's successful, learn from marketers what they've done that's successful, hear from editors, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just a sponge right now trying to gather everything up.
There's no better way. There's no better way. I always say this to the people we work with, like, if you've got a question, we've probably answered it or dealt with it, or we know someone who can deal with it, because, you know, I don't believe there is a set path, but there is a best practice to self-publishing a book. And, you know, as long as your initial aim is to make your book good enough. Quality of writing is not a link to success at all. I've edited books that I thought were some of the best things I've ever read, and they've not really done anything. And I've edited books that, you know, I thought were okay, and they just hit a nerve and people love them. So that's the first thing is you've just got to make sure it's good enough. It's well edited, the story's solid, the book cover's solid. You know, you are right into an audience, and then it's marketing.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of evidence to show people with multiple books tend to do better, because I think it's mainly because the Amazon algorithm picks them up eventually.
Yeah. Well, then if they liked your first book, they're more likely to check out your second book. And so that's a marketing cost you don't have to incur because they already know who you are. They can just click on your link and see it also. Yeah, I think I think there's a I don't recall exactly what it's called. I think it's 20 books to 50K or something like that.
Yes,
Where
yeah,
if you
yeah.
write 20 books, over time it'll give you $50,000 a year in revenue or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, there's no one answer, is there? There's no one answer. But as a general rule, writing fiction, the more books you tend to do, the better. I'm a big fan of mailing lists. I still am. Not necessarily even newsletters. I think having an ability to say to someone, look, if you at the end of your book, look, if you love my book, just sign up here, and the next time I have one out, I'll fire you an email. That I work with writers that do that, and they've got to the stage where they know that they can recoup all of their pre-publication costs because they have an active mailing list.
Yeah,
and I think writers
awesome.
become too caught up in newsletters. Just email when you've got something interesting to say. I genuinely believe that. I know all the marketers are going to the more emails,
well, that's
the better.
their livelihood. So
the more emails, the better. But
I wanted to go back a little bit to the content again. Talk to me about world building. What do you see positives and negatives about world building that people tend to submit to you?
So that's a really good question, actually. The biggest mistake people make is plot dumping. So you've spent a year.
Sorry, is what? Is plot what?
Plot dumping. So
Okay.
you spent a year, or info dumping. You spent a year building this amazing world, and you're itching to tell your readers how amazing this world is. And you start with a prologue or a plot dump, and it'll be 4 or 5 pages of backstory. I will always just say, please remove them. Start smack bang in the middle. Start with some human action, some human emotion, and grab us with the characters. And then, so if you the way to think about how to introduce your world is start in this room, start in the room you're in. What in this room is different from normal? Have I got a sword? Have I got a gun? Is it whatever, magic, whatever it is? And then once I've got that room, give me the building, then give me the street, then give me the city, then give me the world. You don't want to get onto the geopolitics and the interplanet or whatever later on. And the way that you pass that information should be through dialogue and description. So let's say, for example, you wanted to tell the world that you had flying cars. Write a scene in which your character gets in a car that flies. Don't have the narrator say there's flying cars. Show me the flying car. Think about a film. You can't give it a voiceover. So just I want to be in that car. And then there's many ways you could tell us. So in that scene where you're maybe getting into the car, maybe you want to show that only, I don't know, the higher level of society can afford a flying car. You might have people around who are on little bikes or are looking in awe at the flying car. There's lots of ways to show more of your world. Also, then you should be passing your world through dialogue. So if the plot is that I don't know about these flying cars, and you want to say something about the politics, or maybe that I don't know they're fully electric or something, I don't know. Have a character say that. You can have one character tell another that bit of the plot. If you get information from characters in dialogue, it comes to you naturally. If the narrator's telling you, it's like you saying to the reader, "Oh, wait, I just need to tell you something before we carry on," and you'll break everything. So that's the thing with world building. But great world building is a story in itself. People love it.
Yeah. Well, then people will say, like, for example, we'll take Lord of the Rings, my favorite example. Middle Earth is itself a character that Tolkien is describing to you. And so his level of world building is so much different than, like you said, just an info dump. Now, if you're going to read like the Silmarillion and stuff, perhaps you could consider that an info dump. But if someone's going to go read the Silmarillion, it's because they want that.
Yeah. So there is obviously exceptions, but in general, if you're gonna catch someone in a world, you need to be. The world isn't the story most of the time. It's the characters. It's not even the characters. It's how the characters react to events. That's what the real story is. This is why I love sci-fi. I love fantasy. I think it's because you can do things in those genres that you can't do elsewhere, because you can put characters in such extreme situations that, you can delve down into human emotion, which is ultimately what all stories are about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be careful not to make world building the story, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Character is important. Character is everything, rather. That's what I hear so many authors telling me is like, you can have a tripe plot line, or, I mean, you don't want to have a tripe plot line, but you can, as long as the characters, the reader feels for the characters, and you see them grow, kind of like you said.
Yeah. And it's not even likable. They don't even need to be likable. They just need to be human. They need to be experienced an emotion. They need to be, put into events. I always say to people, one of the things an exercise I often do with new writers is get them to write a character sheet. And in that character sheet, I'll say to them, what does the character want most in the world? What is the thing that they would, what is their absolute ultimate? And also, what do they fear most in the world? And then when you've worked out what they fear most in the world, mess with them with that. Give them that. Whatever it is. If it's snakes, give them snakes. Do you know what I mean?
You're evil.
Well, because what's more interesting than seeing someone dealing with their highest highs and their lowest lows?
Yeah. I mean, you say snakes. I already was thinking of Indiana Jones before you even said snakes. Like,
a great example.
He's an amazing hero, but that one thing.
But we don't know why he's scared. This is great show, don't tell. I use this example there's a book we give away on our site called The Writing Manual, and I use that in that book where I say, we don't know why Indy's scared of snakes. We just know he is. Now, I remember seeing a thing where George Lucas said, was it just Spielberg? One of them said that they knew why, but they just never put it in the plot. It just never came in. But it doesn't matter. We don't need to know. We just need to know he's scared. So every time we see a snake, and I don't think he actually says he's scared of snakes, does he? He just says, oh no, not snakes again.
I think in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he does say something that alludes to like anything but snakes or something like that.
Anything but snakes. Yeah. That's great storytelling. The fact you even remember it shows how impactful that is without just saying, oh, he's scared of snakes.
Yeah. So you mentioned new writers. At what point should someone start looking for a developmental editor? Should it be their very first draft? Should they have gone through it a few times themselves? Like, what do you think?
So this is a really interesting question. I would say there's two real scenarios. So the one scenario is that you've been through, you've edited it to death. Your friends and family have looked at it. You've got as much sort of unprofessional feedback as you can, and you literally cannot face reading that manual, the manuscript one more time. And that's the point where you're like, I can't face reading this again. That's when you needed to give it to me, because you've moved everything. You've fixed everything you fixed. And like I said, I'm going to show you stuff you didn't know. It's going to be things that or things that are obvious. The amount of times I edit a writer and they come back and they say, oh, I thought there was going to be a problem with that. But you just need that sort of reassurance. The other situation is someone who is really early in the journey and they have written something and they are not comfortable with they're not confident with what they've got. Sometimes you'll often find even an editing of just the first few chapters will give you a real insight into what you're doing wrong, or it will give you the validation. Now, if you're looking for an editor to validate your work, then they're the wrong person. I often get the question, what do you think of it? And it's kind of irrelevant because my personal tastes are not up. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of the edit. And what I will do though is I will often say where I feel it falls in other books I've edited. I'll say, yeah, this is good. I feel it's weak at this point. But if you're looking for someone to say this is the greatest thing they've ever read, then don't go to an editor. They're not going to say it. Absolutely will not. And they might do, but it'll be right.
Yeah. Any final comments before I let you go?
No, I mean, I just, like I said to you, I'm doing this just because I like helping out, and I've been in the industry so long, and I see places like Reddit, and I sometimes worry that all voices seem to hold equal weight there, and people will give advice that I often feel is not correct, and I'll often message people privately and say, I don't think that was right. I think, try to ignore them. But yeah, no, anyone who wants any help or any advice, they can just reach out to me. And or if they want to join the group, I think you got a link in your. I assume you can put a link somewhere for it, but if not, they just go to BubbleCow and they'll find my email.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we had Gary from BubbleCow Professional Book Editing. I'll put a link in the description to the Discord and to his website. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks a lot. Bye.